Alright, hello and welcome everyone. So today we're going to be talking about Saryn post-rework. She is absolutely incredible right now, and if I might add, a ton of fun. So let's just jump into this first and foremost by talking about the build and why it is the way that it is. So first and foremost, survivability on this. I am using a regular vitality and regenerative molt. Regenerative molt is sadly kind of required on Saryn, I feel. This augment is the reason you're going to be casting her to 99% of the time, and is just so useful to the point of if you don't run it, I feel kind of bad for you. So, sadly, this ability is not built in, and you kind of have to use a mod slot on Regenerative Molt. That being said, it's not so bad, and Saryn's fine even with having to run this. Besides that, the second stat we're going to go over is going to be strength. So, for strength, I'm at 199% strength, and that's just with a max transient fortitude and umbral intensify. If you don't have umbral intensify maxed, that's perfectly fine. Just use regular intensify. Not a big deal. I'm using this because it fits, and there's no real extra anything I need to do in order just to throw it in here and get that little 14% bonus. Moving on, we have our range. 190% range is really nice for the content that I think that Saryn is best at, which is ESO, and that's also why the strength on this build is so high. 199% strength and 190% range means that ESO tiles are going to be cleared quickly and efficiently at a large enough range to cover pretty much the entire tile if you're combining your 1 and your 4 appropriately. That being said, there are changes to this that will make this better at star chart missions. So, if you wanted to be better at star chart missions, you do not need anywhere near this amount of strength, so I would suggest switching out Vitality for Overextended. This basically just makes it so that you can hit huge areas with your spores no matter what, as enemies in Star Chart missions are usually significantly less plentiful, so it's more about just being able to get the spores onto them rather than getting enough damage to actually kill them because they're all tremendously weak. There is one thing to note on this build in that you could spend 3 additional Forma from where this build currently is, and you could, if you really wanted to, use Umbral Vitality along with Umbral Intensify by giving you polarities on Augur Reach, Cunning Drift, and Regenerative Molt. That is a lot of investment that Saryn does not really need in any way. But if you really love Saryn and you want to max her out to a further place than is even ever going to be necessary, be my guest, that's what you would do. Besides that, for energy purposes, we have 100% efficiency, and for unlimited energy, we have Hunter Adrenaline. Get shot, get energy. There is a merit to removing this and using Streamline in Star Chart missions because it's really hard for enemies to actually hurt you. But in general, you're going to be fine on energy just using Zeneric. And then also for energy economy, I'm running Arcane Energize just because that's always helpful to any Warframe using a ton of energy. Along with that, Arcane Guardian, just generally good. Arcane Guardian is good on pretty much every single Warframe in the game, and it's really accessible. So if you're looking for kind of a starter Arcane, this is definitely one of the good ones. Besides that, you'll notice that I am not running Corrosive Projection, and the reason for that is Saryn is one of the very select few Warframes in the entire game that shouldn't be running Corrosive Projection. She strips so much armor from so many enemies so fast that it's actually more useful for her to just have more energy for her abilities. But, of course, you could change this to AV polarity for, growing power or a few other mods. Honestly, the Aura mod on Saryn in particular is kind of just to taste, so do what you like. Anyway, let's go over Saryn's abilities and how they function. So, first and foremost, we're going to start at her 2. So her 2 will give you a little decoy, and with the augment, this will heal you. This will heal you a quite significant amount, and the decoy will last a good amount of time with the duration that is on this build, which is, of course, not excessive duration. This ability is definitely by far the weakest in her entire kit, but using it for healing is kind of required, as I've already gone over. Besides that, we have a bunch of abilities that we need enemies to show off. So let's pause the AI on these level 150s and jump them up here. So we'll head over here. All right, first and foremost, we have her 1. This is Saryn's most important ability. All it does is throw spores onto an enemy. These spores do damage that escalates over time. It will escalate more the more enemies are infected, up to a cap of 10. So you can see the rate that it's going up now is 4 per tick. However, if I use my 3, which will then give me a bunch of toxin procs on all of my weapons and increase my damage by a considerable amount, I can shoot this enemy, and the spores will spread to these 6 enemies, and you can see that it is escalating significantly faster. Also, you can see that this strips a ton of armor. This Corrupted Heavy Gunner at level 150 is already out of armor, because every single time it ticks, it's proccing a bunch of corrosive. Even the one that was more recently hit with these spores is completely out of armor already. And you can see that these get out of hand pretty fast, and this isn't even the max rate that this will scale at. Any enemy that has spores that is hit by a weapon buffed by your 3 will spread them to all enemies within the range of the ability, which is incredibly useful. In addition to that, the way that spores spread, if an enemy dies from anything that is not the spores themselves, the spores will spread. What this means is that you want to be using your 3 with a weapon to hit enemies and then spread the spores to more and more enemies to weaken everyone significantly in the room and kill off any weakling stragglers. This basically makes Saryn's purpose to just spread the spores more so than kill targets, because the spores will take care of the job. You just need to be killing enemies in a preemptive way by giving them the spores. With that, her 3 has a huge bonus when used with melee weapons. Basically, melee weapons just get double the buff, and melee is really strong right now. I don't know if that's going to change in Melee 3.0, of course, but with the strength of melee currently as it is, I would highly advise you to use melee with Saryn if you have the melee weapons for it. There is one thing we have not gone over, and that is her 4. So her 4 is probably the most neglected ability on Saryn. It's definitely the ability you're going to use the least, but that is usually because you kind of don't need to use it. Her 4 will put viral on all enemies in the radius and do some damage. Now, this ability looks really unimpressive. I mean, honestly, that's not that bad of damage for like these fodder enemies, like this butcher. It's not that horrible, right? And it's like double damage because it's viral, all that business. The actual reason to use your 4 is because of a property that is not explained in-game, and that is, if your 1 is on enemies and you use your 4, if your 1 kills this enemy while they are under the effects of your 4, the spores killing them will spread the spores. It gives it back the ability for the spores to spread themselves, which you will see here. The spores will spread themselves if the enemy killed by spores is under the effects of your 4. This is incredibly useful because what this essentially means is that you use your 1, you spread your spores in a more localized area, and then once your spores are strong enough to kill enemies, you hit your 4, and then the enemies that are dying in your current 4 AoE spread outside of your 4 AoE, hitting pretty much the entirety of any map you're going to come across. And what that basically means is because your spores are at a point where those enemies are going to die in that initial area, your spores will spread and be strong enough to kill all the enemies in the outer area, causing a cascade and killing everything on the entire map. And that's really good. I don't know if that's pretty clear. That doing that is that's a lot of damage. That's going to be some good stuff that you're going to have going on there. Anyway, with all that stuff explained and hopefully understood, let's do this test with the AI on. This test is actually exceedingly easy for Saryn, to the point that I want to exemplify just how good Saryn's buff is by using Gram Prime. So for those who are not aware, and the reason this is not getting a why would you use tomorrow, the Gram Prime is currently broken. Combo does not work properly on the Gram Prime. So while it has good base stats, and this here is the build that I am using for it, this weapon has great base stats. However, combo is kind of the thing with melee weapons, and this caps out at a 2x combo. So we're going to use this to exemplify just how good Saryn's ability to kick out damage, like how much it's upping the power of a weapon, because these are level 150 enemies, and a bugged melee weapon, even with really good melee stats, not what you're going to be wanting to use against these enemies. So let's jump into it. So obviously you want to cast your 3, and then you use your 4 as a stun, which it also is, and we're going to start spreading our spores. We want all our enemies to have these spores. So we're going to give them that. And you can see I am at a 2x combo, even though I should be at about a 2.5 right now. Using our 2 to heal and also move faster. Your 2 does give you a speed boost, which I accidentally neglected to mention. The speed boost is actually pretty useful in a number of scenarios. But yeah, all the enemies dead. Yeah, that kind of also shows the other thing your 4 can be used as, which is as an initiator against enemies who are very likely to kill you if given the chance to shoot you. So yeah, that's Saryn. I know it's not really, like, we didn't really kill them ourselves, right? We didn't, like, what Saryn is, she's not straightforward. You're not shooting the enemy and then the enemy falls over. You're giving the enemy spores and then looking away from them to go deal with something else, because once they have the spores, they'll die. You've guaranteed that that enemy with those spores is going to die. They are on a timer. So your only real goal as Saryn is to give everyone the sickness. That's all you're looking for. And it's incredibly effective. Like I said, this is particularly useful in ESO. But it's good everywhere, really. And Saryn with this build is tanky enough to survive pretty much anywhere you need to take her. Like I said, I would personally remove Vitality in a lot of situations where I'm just going to the star chart and put on Overextended, just to hit more enemies at once. But, yeah, that's Saryn. She's incredibly well designed. Like, phew, like, insane. Like, absolutely. Oh, it's so, so good. Like, it's not fantastically explained in-game, particularly the interaction with her 4 and her 1, but that interaction is there, and it's really awesome, and I just love everything about Saryn. She's quickly skyrocketing up my list of frames that I prefer to play, which is a huge feat, and, I mean, hey, she's deserved a rework like this for a long time, and I'm glad that she got it. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and tomorrow, we're not going to talk about the Grand Prime because it's still bugged. Goodbye.